I always encourage families to make decisions while they have options, not while they're in a bigger crisis. So when people ask, when's the right time to start this? It's never too early to start the conversation.
This is Just Call Claudia, a podcast for right-sizing your life and demystifying your relocation. Today I'm being joined by Eric Klein. Eric is owner of CarePatrol Chicagoland North. He is a board-certified patient advocate. He's a board-certified dementia connection specialist, which is very hard to say, and also a board-certified senior advocate. Eric has assisted many families in the Chicagoland area with the challenges that come up with the overwhelming task of continuing care for loved ones. Eric came at this position in this métier and passion organically when he was working with his family and making some long-term care decisions. He discovered that it was really his passion, and he morphed from an executive, a healthcare production executive, into CarePatrol and one of the most successful care advocates in Chicago. Welcome, Eric.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you. When I met you years ago at a networking event, if you remember, and so many of my team remembers it as well, so they were very excited that we were going to have a conversation today. How welcoming, how much information you had, much more than we have in our move management business. So I want you to share, first of all, of course, your journey into senior care, senior advocacy, patient advocacy, which I think is fascinating, and also the dementia aspect, dementia, Alzheimer's, MS, movement disorders, and Parkinson's. There's so much information that's out there and that could be really overwhelming, but I want to hear it from you as you are truly an expert.
Well, Claudia, many years ago, I was a director, producer, photographer, and I owned a production company that specialized in healthcare, pharma, and senior living. People came to me because they thought I was an expert on healthcare, but I just put lipstick on the pig. I made everybody look good.
Okay.
And one day we realized that my wife had muscular dystrophy. My parents both needed care. I had a 101-year-old grandmother, and then my mother-in-law gets diagnosed with dementia. And
was that the ultimate sandwich? Does that mean you were a total sandwich, right?
Well, that kind of put us over the edge, and we truly were the sandwich generation, right? We were taking care of our young children. We also needed to find care for our parents, and we realized that people need help navigating the senior living process. We made a lot of mistakes, and we didn't want other families to have to bear that burden and make those mistakes. Mm-hmm. So when we got engaged with CarePatrol, we used our connections at communities, healthcare providers, and started to what we call place people or connect them with appropriate care. Mm-hmm. We needed a larger organization and resources to effectively manage that, and that's when we started CarePatrol in Chicago.
I see. Were you originally in Chicago when all these developments happened in your family and loved ones?
Yeah, we were. We're based in Chicago. Our family's from Chicago, and I specialize in Northern Illinois or the Chicagoland area.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've certainly met you at the North Shore communities where that's how we've collaborated with referrals. You'll refer us for our, terrific services. Share with me the challenges that you weren't aware of when you were walking through this process with your parents and how that's informed your business today.
Often as families start to navigate this process, they're not aware of the options that are out there. When you're in a hospital or a rehab or a healthcare setting, they often direct you on a path that may or may not be appropriate for you. Mm-hmm. They're not aware of the variety of resources and options that are out there. Mm-hmm. The other challenge is that when you walk into a healthcare environment, you really have no way to navigate it. You're using your senses to judge the environment. You might like the pretty chandelier or the beautiful lobby, but you have no insight into the actual healthcare component. Mm-hmm. That's what we bring to the table.
I see. So when you're meeting a potential client, are you often visiting them at home or in more of a healthcare setting?
Yeah, we will go into their home.
Okay.
We do what's called a care discovery, and the care discovery is our intake process. That could be in the home, a hospital, or a rehab.
How do people find you? Is it usually word of mouth? Is it within the hospital?
So we kind of work in two capacities. We work at the point of discharge. That could be a hospital case manager, social worker, or discharge planner. But we also work direct with families. we've helped so many families over a period of time that we're kind of that go-to resource in Chicagoland to help families through the process.
So working with healthcare environments where they say, and in the event you're looking for a senior community or you'd like to stay in your home and need continuing care, and here's the gentleman that can help you. Is that what you're doing when I can't reach you on the phone? You're constantly networking. I know you're very good at that.
Yeah, we do network quite a bit. So we can respond in crisis, but we also work on long-term care planning. So a crisis might be, mom breaks the hip, goes into the ER and ends up in the hospital. Upon discharge, they might be either sending her to a rehab or home. That's when we want to get engaged. We want to help you through that process to make the right decisions. When it comes to long-term care planning, you might have a recent diagnosis, something like a cancer or a movement disorder or a cognitive challenge, and it's going to be a little bit of a longer journey. So rather than helping a family make quick decisions, we help them process that over months and sometimes years.
Okay. Would there be, it's so interesting, because if someone enlists your service, they can be assured you can kind of marshal them during the different stages of their needs, right? So you're going to talk about long-term, but what's needed for the next 6 months to a year. Am I understanding that right? And then what potentially if the at-home care doesn't work, for example, which everybody today still, I'm going to stay home. I'm going to stay home until I'm 100. But what they don't understand is care is really an issue, the quality of care in your home. And sometimes it's more advantageous if you move into a senior community, right?
It is. We do find that most people don't want to leave their homes, and that's always part of the conversation. If we can accommodate someone's care needs at home, we will help them do that. If not, we're going to educate them. We're going to talk about the attributes and the reasons why out-of-home care, potentially in an assisted living, a memory care, or a nursing care setting, if necessary, is more appropriate.
Yeah, I'm thinking about our clients. I'm thinking about when at least I've experienced challenges with families where there might be a differing amongst the family, right? Maybe a child doesn't want their parents moving into a senior community, as beautiful and as independent they're going to be, whatever that means for them. I don't know, but sometimes we have those challenges. How do you deal with the challenges with loved ones and conflict?
Well, family dynamics are always complex.
Yeah.
If there's 4 kids, there's going to be 20 opinions.
And do you often meet with all of them together initially so you get kind of the whole scenario?
Yeah, that's idea.
Okay.
If the opportunity is available, we like to meet in their home.
Right.
We want to see how the family interacts. We want to see how they manage in their environment. If not, we do Zoom. Very often kids are in other states or even other countries. But we will try to rally the troops. We'll try to get the families together and help create a narrative so that everybody's on the same page. And by the end of the process, the goal is to take care of the family member, right? So we're going to make sure that not only is the care plan focusing on, let me say that again. We're going to make sure that not only is the care plan focusing on the patient or the person that we're potentially placing or providing services for, but that it meets the needs of the whole family.
Wow, that could be pretty complex.
It is complex. Care plans, with care plans, there's no one size fits all. So we are tailoring a solution to meet each family's needs.
Right. Very customized, like my business. I call it the concierge style. I think what's interesting about our compatible businesses, as much as you're in your lane and certainly we're in our lane, there's almost a therapeutic cycle. We're at times really supporting in a psychological fashion the client, supporting them where maybe they're overwhelmed and those family dynamics for the many years are coming through and they might not want to hear from their daughters encouraging or discouraging or acting out, right? So we have to be the support, right?
Yeah, I think that's a role for us. As we go through that process, very often the adult kids are not honoring their parents. Very often the parents are not respecting the opinion of their children. So when we come in, we're trying to provide that objective, third-party approach and oversight. We're going to give them the wisdom and knowledge of all the other people that we've put through this system. And we're also going to focus on not just their immediate needs, but what those needs might look like in the future.
Amazing.
That they're not even aware of.
I think that's part of it. Right now, we're moving, some wonderful individuals into independent living in very large cottages or even condos. And at times, I want to stop the whole family and say, your parents are in their 80s. should you be considering something more long-term? Because it is hard to stay independent. It is hard, right? As you age, how can we help people, including me, help me with the reality of aging and the respect? And I think I see it all the time because we're all like, oh no, that's not going to happen to us. Of course it's going to happen to us, right? How can we better prepare our peers, colleagues, and support our seniors through this process?
Well, most people think it's not going to happen to them.
Right.
Most people think they're going to maintain their independence forever, for a really long period of time. And one of the things we find out is that assumptions don't work. Very often, parents think that their adult daughter is going to provide care for them. Mm-hmm. They may think that their adult son is going to be there financially, or if something happens, they'll just move into the kid's house and they'll take care of them. Mm-hmm. We find those assumptions don't work. So when we start to put together a care plan, we're going to address those clinical needs, the family dynamics, and also the financial concerns. And as we start to bring those things together, that's when the family starts to come on board. When they start to kind of accept the narrative that maybe their parents are aging and need more care, or maybe it's a wife that decides that or realizes that her husband just can't be managed at home anymore. Mm-hmm. We start to surround them with both resources and love to kind of take them to the next steps.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to evaluating a potential client, patient, however, a resident of a senior community, when you're meeting in the home, do you already have a medical diagnosis for that individual? Do you like to work from that basis? Mm-hmm.
So when we meet with a family, our intake is called a care discovery. Mm-hmm. There's both a clinical and a financial component to that. So some of that is just a conversation. It's establishing what their activities of daily living look like, where they are struggling and what those needs are. Mm-hmm. We will also gather clinical information from a primary care doctor, maybe a neurologist, a cardiologist, or if they're in a clinical setting, we will get the information from the hospital or the rehab along with those discharge instructions. That'll start to paint a clinical picture of what those needs are.
Mm-hmm. Do you come forearmed with that information, or do you know what I'm saying? How many steps to that discovery process? It can't be a one and done.
No, it depends where we meet them.
Very involved, right?
Right. If somebody's already in the clinical setting, we have a direct connection to that information. Okay. If not, it's a gathering process.
Right.
So we're going to coach them. We're going to provide lists and support, and sometimes communication directly with those healthcare providers as we gather the information.
Okay, so this might be kind of a bizarre question. Is it ever too early if you're in your late 70s or early 80s living independently to have an evaluation by someone like yourself to put the hard questions to the individual so they're better prepared for the future?
I always encourage families to make decisions while they have options, not while they're in a bigger crisis. Mm-hmm. So when people ask, when's the right time to start this? It's never too early to start the conversation.
And it's also never too early, and this is something I've spoken about with many people and certainly on this podcast recently, is it's kind of never too early. I mean, late 70s, early 80s, to research senior communities. You're living independently, but what if there's, you take a fall? What if all of a sudden your driver's license has to be revoked because of sight or some other neurological situation? It really isn't ever too early, is it?
It's never too early to educate yourself. One of the trends that we're seeing is that there is an earlier onset of disease these days. So most people think of somebody with dementia as grandma in her 80s.
Right.
Or they think of a Parkinson's of somebody, in their maybe mid-70s. But it is not unusual these days to see an earlier onset of dementia. Maybe it's in their 40s or early 50s. Or even movement disorders that start to affect people 40s, 50s, and 60s. So it's never too early to start the process.
I know when you and I last saw each other, we talked about the higher incidence of Parkinson's and MS that we're experiencing with our clients. And you shared some information with me that was really painful, but I've kept it in the back of my head, how you, within your field, are seeing so many more incidents at younger ages of Parkinson's. To what do you attribute this?
A lot of times correlation doesn't always mean causation, but because of the volume of people we do deal with, we see patterns in certain areas. So there's sections of Chicago where there seems to be clusters of Parkinson's or clusters of a particular dementia. We don't have any research or clinical data on it, but we do see those patterns. They're probably environmental factors.
Yeah, water.
Could be water, food, could be electricity, heavy metals. But it's probably what they're drinking, the environment they're in, what they're putting into their bodies.
How do you break that information to a potential client? You know, potentially your environment could be someone putting you at risk. You know, how do you say that to someone?
Yeah, when we're working with families, we're typically not looking backwards. We're looking forwards.
Okay.
So we're trying to surround them with resources that are going to meet their needs, that are going to relieve the stress. And if we can start directing them to a healthier lifestyle, that's a small part of our role. But we're not going to dwell on the past. We're going to focus on the good future we can provide them.
Okay, that's interesting because I had a conversation with a lady at the hardware store yesterday, and she said to me, "I bet you've missed me." And I said, "Well, come to think of it, I haven't seen you in a while." And she said, "Well, you know, I was in the hospital," and she went on and on and on. This woman is not that old, and I knew that she smoked. And she said, "You know, and I was in the hospital for 4 months, and I was in ICU," and she was going on. And I said, "So how are you doing now?" She said, "I'm better. I'm back to work. I've got to go to the doctors all the time." And I said, "Well, I hate to ask you, but are you still smoking?" She said, "Of course I'm still smoking." And, you know, I'm not involved on a healthcare, you know, basis with our clients. And generally speaking, I'm very fortunate. As much as I can tell our clients to do the best they can to maintain their health, but it's not easy. I really feel for you because you want to encourage people to be better. But what I'm hearing from this woman, and the reason I brought it up, is she's not going to give up her lifestyle, right? She just wants life to be easier for her in situ. She doesn't want to change it. She just wants it to be as good as can be. And we know her health is eroding because of her behavior, right?
Yeah, that's not unusual. You know, people are allowed to make lousy decisions. Right. So when people have capacity, we're not there to be judgmental. We're there to love on them. Right. So we'll come alongside, we'll guide them, we'll direct them, and we'll get them the care that they need with the support that's going to give them a good quality of life.
Right. When you're dealing, I go back to the family system, when you're dealing with families that maybe are in a disagreement or not ready or have been challenging their parents on their health care decisions, you know, maybe drinking too many Diet Cokes or maybe not getting out and walking, I am sure, I already have the answer to the question, but do you feel that you're more effective in that support mode than so many of the children of the loved one because you don't have the same emotional tie and dynamic from the past, right?
Yeah, we're always going to take a loving and caring approach, but we're not family. We're going to bring an outside perspective to it.
Right.
And we try to get the support of the family, the kids, and the structure around them so that when we're dealing with the actual patient or potential resident, we build trust. And that happens over a period of time. When we develop a relationship with a family, we might have to be responding to that crisis, but we manage the crisis and we stay with them through the process. At CarePatrol, we're not a list service. We don't just give names and resources.
Right.
We're there to kind of help navigate that and stay with them off until end of life.
That's really powerful. Who to this point, how many years have you had one specific client that you've taken through this process? In the 8 years you've been in business, do you still have some ongoing clients from the very beginning?
We do.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, we've been doing CarePatrol about 8 years now, and we maintain very strong client and family relationships. So we have people since day one that are still with us, and we stay in contact because care needs change. We can help communicate with healthcare providers and communities. We can even help the communities deal with families when they're difficult to communicate with. And we will stay with them through that process right until end of life if they want us to.
Do you check in with families periodically about their loved one, if how they're doing? How do you maintain that ongoing relationship, build new relationships, take care of a business, and have a personal life at the same time? I'm kind of blown away.
Yeah, it's juggling a lot of people over a long period of time.
Right.
But we do maintain regular contact if the family wants it. We'll make sure if those care needs change, we're there for support. And very often families reach out to us for other education and resources that they might need as you go through the aging process. We're also in and out of these communities on a regular basis. So when we are in the communities, we visit our families. We want to see how they're interacting in the dining room, how the aides are responding to them, how the nurses are taking care of them.
Okay. I think we're going to take a break right now. Eric has so much more information that I want to hear and share with my audience. And we'll be back with episode 2 of Eric Klein in a bit. Thanks for listening. You can follow me on Instagram at CMFTO or check out our website, cmfto.com, to learn more about my business.